Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. I'm Ben, and today's character highlight is about Nomi Sunrider. In this video, we'll have a quick summary of this character's background, I'll talk about her personality traits as well as her Jedi powers. At the end, I'll give you my personal impression of this character and what I hope to see in the future. As always guys, thank you so much for supporting me. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought about this overview, or if you are familiar with this character, tell me about this whole comic book, what was your impression? Anyway, let's dive right into it. So, Nomi Sunrider was created by the author Tom Veitch, and her first appearance was in a Dark Horse comic book called Tales of the Jedi issue number 3, which was released in December of 1993. The character was designed by a Canadian artist called Janine Johnston. She was known for drawing Star Wars comic books, particularly Tales of the Jedi. She's also known for illustrating Magic the Gathering cards, Warhammer, ElfQuest, and so forth. So let's begin with the background and talk about, just in a very quick, abbreviated summary, what Nomi Sunrider's story is like. So early on, her first maiden name is Nomi Dabota, and she was married to a Jedi Knight, Andor Sunrider. Now we have to remember this comic book is from 1993. This is way before Star Wars prequels were coming out, and here Jedi are basically having regular affairs. They have families, they fall in love with one another. It's a quite different take aesthetically from what we see later on in the prequels. So right from the beginning, even though she was a wife of a Jedi but not a Jedi herself, she had strong connection to the Force, but she'd never imagined herself of becoming a Jedi. She was just like a timid young woman who just wanted a simple life and just support her husband. The couple and their daughter stayed on the Harath planet for a while during the time of his tutelage, but eventually the family started traveling, and unfortunately during their journey they were ambushed. And these thugs coming from Boga the Hutt came, they found out that Andor is carrying these precious Adagon crystals used for creating lightsabers. And the thugs attack the family for this basically precious cargo, and they throw this very venomous creature upon the Jedi, and no matter how hard he tried to defend himself, eventually he's killed off. And immediately after this tragedy, Andor's Force Ghost emerges and compels his young wife to defend their family, to defend herself and her young daughter Vima. And Nomi grabs her late husband's lightsaber, and in anger she strikes down and she kills the thugs. And immediately she felt remorse, she felt guilt, but Andor's Force Ghost once again reemerges and tells her, look, I love you, our time together is done, I have to depart, but basically you have to follow my footsteps and become the Jedi and take on this journey because you always had potential, you were always very powerful in the Force. Now, fulfilling her late husband's final request, she travels to the planet of Umbria to study under Master Thrawn, a very ancient and wise Jedi from Chuktsai species. Very, very interesting and original character design for this Jedi Master. Nomi undergoes rigorous training and meditation. She understands that she has this natural affinity with battle meditation, an extremely powerful Jedi technique, which we'll talk about a little bit later. She also learns to overcome her personal feelings and grief over her husband's loss. For bringing Adagon crystals to this planet and giving them to her master, in return, Master Thrawn gifts her with his personal lightsaber that he actually inherited from his old master. But she's reluctant to use it, and she puts it aside, and she still learns to master her personal anger and that particular aggression where she lashed out and she killed her attackers. Eventually, on this very same planet, she has a second encounter with this very same gang from Boga the Hutt. This time she acts in defense. She realizes with clear mind what she must do to defend herself and save her daughter and Master Thrawn. After this event, she traveled with him to the Jedi Library on Ossus, where she was introduced to larger concepts and Jedi knowledge. Later on in her life, Nomi Sunrider fought in the Freedom Dawn Uprising, a major event which took place roughly 4,000 years before the events of the movie. There, he meets the young and courageous Keldroma brothers dispatched to Onderon planet with their master, Arca Jeth. She's sent there as a relief for Ulic Keldroma's forces to fight off the new Sith cult called the Nadists. And they're basically the ones who cause a Freedom Knot uprising. Nomi and Ulic Qel-Droma and other Jedi fight against King Amen, and eventually they share a very strong bond, and the two Jedi quickly fall in love with one another. But unfortunately, tragic events ensue. This is war. This is very hard time for everyone. And basically the Jedi are thin. They're spread across the galaxy. And Ulic Qel-Droma feels the temptation, and he eventually falls to the dark side. And he actually encounters another Sith called Exar Kun, another fallen Jedi. And together they challenge each other to a duel to see who will become the next Sith Lord. But they actually join forces, and they begin to wage their own personal war on the galaxy. Later, this Sith war spreads like wildfire across the galaxy. And at this time, Nomi Sunrider studied with one of the wisest Jedi called Oran-Ur from an age earlier before. He's a once again, very sagely and very wise Jedi. And Nomi Sunrider, in her own right, becomes a very prominent Jedi Knight and eventually a Jedi Master. Meanwhile, the fallen Jedi Ulic Qel-Droma, he enlists the help of the Mandalore the Great, and he takes the Mandalorian forces to strike on Coruscant, the heart of the galactic civilization. And there's an epic battle that ensues there, and in the aftermath, Ulic Qel-Droma is actually defeated and he's apprehended. Nomi Sunrider is there to stop him, and she actually resorts to this very drastic measure. She once again uses a technique which is very, very seldomly used or known to any Jedi, which she basically severs him from the Force. And Ulic Qel-Droma is completely disabled. After that, they have a Jedi trial, and later on in that story, Ulic Qel-Droma actually comes back to the light. He helps the Jedi, and he redeems himself. But in the meantime, his other cohort, Exar Kun, his remaining forces, his Masashi warriors, they're basically chased across the galaxy by the Jedi, and the final battle takes place on Yavin 4, a planet which we all know from the original Star Wars movie, right? A New Hope, in the beginning, where we see that temple where all the rebels are and from which they conduct their attack on the Death Star. That's basically one of the temples, and there's many of them in the background. And in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, in one of these temples, this is where Exar Kun is laid to rest, and this is where he's defeated. After the war, Nomi becomes the head of the Jedi Order. She becomes extremely powerful and prominent, and her young daughter Vima, now this young adult woman, she seeks out, and he finds the self-exiled Ulic Qel-Droma, and she actually becomes his apprentice. Now, this was a very quick overview of her story. Now let's talk a little bit about Nomi Sunrider's personality traits and her powers. We know from the beginning of the story that she's a very sweet and gentle and passionate young woman, and she just basically dreamed of a simple life with her husband and basically supporting him and her daughter. But she was forced to take the path of the Jedi warrior through the tragic events which I've described earlier. And devastated over the loss of her first love and her Sunrider, she had to deal with a lot of grief and a lot of anger and remorse over killing these criminals. So she's a person that goes through a lot of personal problems and emotional turmoil. And her life is basically like a roller coaster from the beginning to end, which is quite a huge contrast from what we see later in Star Wars prequels, for example, where the Jedi are supposed to be these very serene and very kind of like calm and meditative people. The Jedi of the old age, of the old Republic, are very, very different as described in this comic book. And we know that, she's just a loving and caring person that, I personally felt completely devastated experiencing her heartbreak over this betrayal, that she fell in love with this new guy, this very charismatic leader, Ulic Qel-Droma, and he betrays her love and he betrays the Jedi. So this is something that she also had to deal with. But once again, the beauty of her personality emerges, and she shows a lot of empathy and a lot of love and trust in her redeemed friend. I mean, trust enough to allow her daughter Vima to go and train with him. So I thought it was very, very interesting. But now let's talk about her Jedi powers, which I think are some of the coolest that we've ever seen in the Star Wars lore, and something that we see emulated in BioWare's original Knights of the Old Republic video game through the character of Bastila Shan. Now we know that Nomi Sunrider has the potential as is described in the beginning of the story. She has natural affinity to the Force, and they transform into extraordinary powers. So early on, when she has nothing to do with the Jedi or their teachings, after her husband is defeated and killed, she immediately is able to see his Force ghost at a very young age. And when she just started her apprenticeship, right away, she showed affinity for battle meditation. And once again, influencing the minds of her opponents, as she did with the Hutt's thugs. She basically made them disoriented and fight each other, and this is when she was able to strike them. We know that Nomi Sunrider also had strong communicating skills. She could interact with animals and command them to do what she needed them to do. And she had another powerful skill called the Battle Mind, and that was a technique used to combat or to counter Sith magic that was used to confuse you or to like, put a charm on you or throw an illusion, and it's something that she was able to counteract. We also know that Nomi was an exceptional lightsaber fighter against many opponents. She won just by herself during the Freedom Knot Uprising. She fought in the thick of battle by herself versus many opponents. And we also know, as I mentioned earlier, that she was one of the very few Jedi who ever lived who could sever Force-sensitive people from ever using the Force by attacking and destroying the midichlorians. And this is what she used, once again, to reiterate the point. She used it on Ulic Qel-Dromar after he murdered his younger brother, Kay. Another ability that Nomi possessed was called the Wall of Light. And it's something that her, alongside thousands of Jedi, had to erect to basically seal the spirit of Exar Kun on the temple in Yavin 4. Now, what was my impression of this character? I was introduced to her, obviously, to the comic book of Tales of the Jedi by Tom Veitch, and later on Kevin J. Anderson and other writers were involved. But, and I learned about this comic book through the video game. I first learned the staple name of Knights of the Old Republic from BioWare, and I started researching. I learned there was a comic book which actually came out a couple of years earlier. And the impression that I had that struck me the most specifically about Nomi Sunrider were her very emotional roller coaster ride of a journey, right? She's this very gentle personality type, and she has a very humble and simple lifestyle, and she had to trade it off for a path of the Jedi and participate in this very hard, turmoiled time and of era of a Sith war, and she gained prominence and led other Jedi in battle and the eventual victory. I really enjoyed her very admirable character traits. No matter the loss of her Jedi husband or the fear of losing her daughter Vima and overcoming her personal anger and hatred and betrayal as well, she persevered and she always came on top. She was tempted by the dark side. She had personal anger. She was not this flawless, perfect, pristine Jedi, but she overcame all the hardships that life threw at her. And another thing that I really enjoyed about her, particularly when it comes to individual comic book covers, the illustrations just portray her perfectly. She's just such a great and memorable character design. You know, in comparison to the Knights of the Old Republic by BioWare, when I looked at that game, I remember a lot of my friends and myself talked about that video game, and we said that, look, how come in 4,000 years between the events of Star Wars movies and the events portrayed in the game, the technology didn't quite progress that much? I mean, there's a lot of designs, right? Even Ibn Hawk that we see in the a video game, it resembles Millennium Falcon so much. All of the designs, the ships, the everything. And even the Jedi too, they looked too familiar for me. But when you looked at the comic book artist's work in the Tales of the Jedi, they did a phenomenal job in bringing you to an era gone by, to a new fantastical magical place 4,000 years ago, which just gives you a completely different outlook on what the Jedi were like. And Nomi Sunrider's character design was a perfect illustration of that. And I really, really enjoyed that fantasy influence on her. And the last thing I want to mention is what I really loved, what was really satisfying to me, is the final resolution with Ulic Qel-Droma, right? The Jedi who fell, who betrayed her, and eventually they kind of, in a way, were able to forgive one another. And her daughter Vima served as a link between these two Jedi, and she went and she trained with him. So what at the end, I'd like to say, what are my hopes for Nomi Sunrider going into the future of Star Wars? We know that we have, obviously, the new canon, right? We have the new books, but old Star Wars Legends books are also being in print right now. So how do I see this character ever coming back? Well, we had something interesting happening on Disney Plus, where they took the Tales of the Jedi logo from the original comic book, but they actually decided to move closer in the timeline and show us the Jedi from the Clone Wars, right? We see Count Dooku, and we see Ahsoka in there. But if we basically take that and we dial the time back and we go 4,000 years in the past, I don't see why they can't explore the past and actually bring back Nomi Sunrider and the Uprising and the Sith War and Ulic Qel-Droma and his master Arca-Jett. Bring all of those characters back in there and see if the modern audience would have a taste for this kind of storytelling. I also would love to see a hardcover reprint of the Tales of the Jedi. Now, I know we have the softcover reissue, which recently came out like a month or so ago. And actually, on Kevin J. Anderson's personal website, they have custom-made signed versions of the book, which they sell. But that's a softcover. I enjoy collecting the hardcover of those big books. So I would like the collection of the entire Jedi Order, of the Golden Age of the Sith, and all of that stuff in one collection in hardcover. That would be really, really cool to reintroduce a new generation of fans to this character. And the last thing is that I want to see, I mean, we had the Knights of the Old Republic video game remake being announced by Asper Media, and now there's some kind of hardships going on, but I'm pretty sure they're going to proceed with it, no matter what. After that announcement was made, it's basically Pandora was out the box. There is no way they're not going to make this a game. It's one of the most popular video games ever made. I mean, people who are not even Star Wars know it, they loved it, and I'm pretty sure it's coming. Maybe not Asper Media will be handling it, but somewhere else would. But the original idea, the gist of it, of the project that we got, was that they wanted to maintain and honor what was originally in the game, but also expand upon it. Now, in which shape or form that's going to manifest, I don't really know, but I would assume you would expand it probably with more playable characters, your party members, or more NPC, non-playable characters that you could interact with. And in the original game, now I'm not talking about the remake, but the original video game, we do get Ulic Qel-Droma's Jedi robe in one of the caverns, in one of the caves. You find it, and when you read the actual name of the item, it blew my mind. I'm like, oh my god, they're referencing the comic books here, which the video game is based upon. So with a full-blown remake, where you have the opportunity to expand on the story and maybe have a couple of flashbacks and discuss the characters, the Jedi that came before, maybe you will have a flashback of one of the most prominent leaders of the Jedi Order, Nomi Sunrider. I think it would be pretty cool. It would be a nice treat for old school fans like myself, and for you guys who are hearing about this character for the first time. It'll be a nice introduction, and maybe you'll go out there and check out the comic books. Anyway, guys, that's it for this character highlight. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please drop a comment in the video section below. Let me know what you think about Nomi. Like this video, sub to the channel, and I'll check you guys next time. Take care.